Welcome to the GreenPilled Network podcast. If you're just joining us, we're building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers using crypto to bring positive sum digital systems to the world. This podcast features the people who are doing it, and we publish a season of about a dozen episodes every couple months. This season is Lean Mean Capital Allocation Machines. Capital allocation is the process of deciding how to spend or invest financial resources. With Web3, we can now do on-chain capital allocation, which means we can do more transparent, more corruption resistance, more democratic capital allocation, more weird capital allocation than has ever been done before. So this is the theme of GreenPilled Season 4, Lean Mean Capital Allocation Machines, and we are featuring the coolest experiments in this space. And today's episode does not disappoint. My guest today is Nico Gallardo, the founder of Lotto PGF, which facilitates permissionless lotteries for public goods funding on Ethereum. So basically, using Lotto PGF, you can finance public goods in 3 stages: create a lottery, incentivize donations, and then picking winners and distributing funds. So lotteries are a way that we have funded public goods for centuries, and the opportunity here is to bring lotteries on chain. We talk in this episode about how Lotto PGF works, and then we also talk about Nico's big vision for funding public goods and all of the things that are within the scope of capital allocation and our reinvention of how we fund the commons in the 21st century. So this is a very fun episode. It was good to hang out with Nico at ETC for a little bit, and looking forward to learning more about Lotto PGF as it grows over the coming years. Enjoy. What's up, Nico?
Hey, what's up, Kevin? How's it going?
Pretty good. Excited to talk about Lotto PGF today. You want to tell us what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, the tagline of Lotto PGF is new mechanism to fundraise for public goods through lotteries. Let's say, to give some background, lotteries have been historically very interesting to fund public goods in a, let's say, non-coercive and voluntary basis. A lot of people don't know this, but for example, Harvard or Yale wouldn't be a thing if they wouldn't have been kickstarted through a lottery. But also like big things like the Great Wall of China, or some reparations in ancient Rome when Caesar Augustus was the Caesar. They used lotteries to repair ancient Rome. And even in the global south, I come from Bolivia, so I know that a lot of people use lotteries to raise for different smaller things, but also for bigger things. National lotteries nowadays are supposed to also fund public goods, but we've seen that, well, they've been monopolized by the state, and that turns them into very inefficient ways of, well, in an inefficient mechanism, because, well, they get to pick which public goods are funded, and, well, the operational costs are immense. So that's what we're aiming to solve with Lotto PGF.
So basically a on-chain lottery for public goods funding. Can you tell us about how Lotto PGF works?
So actually the team, well, now contributors, have been doing a lot of research behind on-chain randomness and how to create verifiable randomness, and we're very excited about everything that's happening in that realm. We can talk about that later as well. And so the reason why lotteries on chain haven't happened yet is because it's actually quite complicated if you will really want to make it completely verifiable, transparent, and fair, because there's like some shuffling algorithms that are quite hard to put on chain, and that's kind of like the expertise of the technical contributors of Lotto PGF. And basically how we set it up is using this technology of verifiable, fair on-chain randomness and these shuffling algorithms that were actually inspired by some code that Vitalik wrote in 2018 that was like super obscure, hidden there, but one of the guys found it and worked on it. They're open source, so you can check it out. And we put this together in a sort of factory in which anybody can set up a lottery and configure it the way they want to fund the public good they want. So they can decide, for example, what percentage goes to fund the public good and what percentage goes to feed the prize pool, so that it keeps incentivizing people to participate. And you can also configure the odds, or like probabilities, that people have to win when they buy a ticket. And there's more stuff coming up that we're working on. For example, allowing people to have, if they predict, let's say, 3 out of 5 numbers, that they also get a smaller price, for example, so that it incentivizes them to play. Pretty much like we're trying to make traditional lotteries and put them on chain as similar as possible.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm as you're speaking, I'm just remembering being a kid and during the nightly news, the Powerball lotteries that would happen, and they'd always like the winner and then like highlight the winner and make a big media event about it. And I guess I never really thought about where the money was going, but in theory, it's going to fix roads and to provide services for the county. If we can have provably fair on-chain randomness, like without the overhead of lotteries in the 21st century, it'd be kind of interesting to see how much that funds public goods versus other sources like sequencer fees or DAO treasuries and stuff like that. Feels like it could be really powerful if you get a certain flywheel going.
Yeah, exactly. It's very interesting because indeed what you say, like traditional lotteries have 10 to 15% of operational costs that, well, you basically can get rid of them with using smart contracts because you don't need any financial intermediaries, you don't need to trust anybody, you don't need to hire people. I mean, maybe for the distribution side, you still need some operational costs, but for the rest, it's pretty much, I don't know, 10 to 15% free money that could go straight to fund the public good. And maybe like a small fun fact, the first test lottery that we developed is called Powerball. So kind of like a joke on the Powerball lottery.
So Powerball, duh. Like the bald meme, as opposed to Powerball, which is the traditional lottery. And I see there's a picture of Brian Armstrong on there, who's the progenitor of the bald meme on base. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we did that kind of like as a joke, and it was quite successful. We used it to test our contracts and the randomness tech, and we also allowed people to donate to increase their chances of winning. And through that, we actually managed to sponsor or co-sponsor GIVETH quadratic funding round. So it was kind of like a good proof of concept of what we were aiming here.
That's great. Any other? I see on the website LottoPGF.org. I see a bunch of Lotto PGF integrations in the wild, and then ones that were out of the pond too, which I think it just means that projects that have graduated. Yeah, can you tell us about any other examples of Lotto PGF being used in pilot programs that you've run?
Actually, I'm going next week to Zoo Village, Georgia. It's one of the Zuzalu related events, and we're going to run a pilot with them as an experiment for lotteries to fund network states or coordinations or startup cities, however you want to call them. So that's going to be very interesting. I'm excited to see how that plays out. But also, we've seen some people just wanting to experiment with it. For example, there is a community called Crypto Conexión. They mostly produce content to inform the Spanish speaking community about crypto initiatives. They're preparing to launch a lottery to fund different Spanish speaking communities using Lotto PGF and also a frame on Farcaster. So that's pretty cool to see. Then there's also a bigger project that is very ambitious, and I'm super excited to see how it plays out. I know it's going to take a little bit longer. Basically, what they want to do is create a lottery that would kind of help pay out the student loan debt and raise money through these lotteries in the US. And well, they really want to make it. The people working on it are lawyers, so they want to make sure everything's completely legal, and they already set up a nonprofit for it. So that's going to be a super interesting use case to see play out. Yeah, well, there's some other ones that are starting to experiment. Mostly, for example, Gnosis or they want to, or Octant or Giveth, they actually want to experiment a little bit on how they can incentivize activity in their things that they're doing through a lottery, which is also possible with the protocol or maybe some modifications that we can do to it. And yeah, it will be interesting to see how those play out as well. We're actively working on them. Yeah, well, I would say the ones that people can interact with right now are the one that's going to be launched in the next couple of days, probably when this podcast is out, from On-Chain Loteria is called, like the Crypto Conexión Lottery. And also there is one that a meme coin actually organized on Scroll, and they are donating 90% of the ticket sales to water charity, and the 10% goes back to keep feeding the prize pool. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
I'm wondering if you could tell me your big vision for Lotto PGF. If you're maximally successful in the next 10, 15 years, what does the world look like? What would it be like? How big could this get, you think?
Well, lotteries nowadays, they have a lot of money at play. Like if you go to the Lotto PGF website, we did the calculation, and there is like almost $400 billion of revenue produced every day through lotteries. I believe that with making it a protocol on chain, we can channel all those funds and make them, by making them a lot more transparent, and by reducing the operational costs that traditional lotteries have. I believe we can help fund a lot of public goods. And our I guess like the reason why we are starting to collaborate with Zuzalu and also started to talk with Crecimiento, which is another kind of like network state sort of idea that is coming in Argentina, is because, well, the US used lotteries to fund their initial infrastructure after the War of Independence. So I mentioned at the beginning Harvard and Yale, but also a lot of other stuff like schools, and also more infrastructure like physical infrastructure was funded through lotteries. So we believe that we can potentially fund a lot of the public goods that are needed for network states through lotteries, and make them, this voluntary tax, let's say, a big thing, and probably hopefully start replacing the amount of taxes that people can have to pay to fund public goods through this thing that is a little bit more voluntary and non-cohesive. And yeah, so maybe that on the network state front, but I believe also that maybe I'm curious to hear what you think, Kevin, actually. But I see sometimes a bit of a problem with relying on sponsors or like big parties for quadratic funding or retro PGF, and maybe Lotto PGF could be one of the pieces of the puzzle and the public goods funding equation that you can kind of combine with quadratic funding or retro PGF, and kind of get rid of the sponsor on that side. Yeah, what do you think about that?
So basically, the market for lotteries is in the billions of dollars, and basically, I think the theme of this season for me is capital allocation. We can do more transparent, more immutable, more provably fair, democratic capital allocation on chain than we could ever do before. And like Lotto PGF is just like fits right into that vision for me. We're going to do transparent, provably fair lotteries without a bunch of administrative overhead. So we could like just replace the existing lottery infrastructure with this. And I think that that's quite powerful because lotteries have shown to be an effective way to raise money for public goods. And so, if we have better lotteries, do we have better public goods funding? And, I think that the place that we're in with public goods funding is we've got this libertarian ethos, people who don't want to pay taxes. And you've got sort of like the very valid, also sort of like solar punk ethos of solving coordination failures. And you need money in order to do that. And so that leaves me with an important design space is non-coercive ways of funding public goods. And I think that lotteries are one of them. And so it seems like it's an important design space. And as you said, the capital allocation strategies, things like QF and retroactive funding and conviction funding, are totally complementary to the new ways of getting funding into these things. Lotto PGF, sequencer fees, DAO treasuries, what Octant is doing is interesting also. So it's all just combining funding sources with distribution sources at the end of the day would be my like very reductionist response to your question back to me. So yeah, play jazz on top of that. What does that make you think of?
Actually, so Lotto PGF is just kind of like the first protocol that the DAO behind it is producing. We call it Otto Dao. Otto is our mascot, this little frog that if you go to lottopgf.org, you'll see. And
now all the frog references on the website make more sense to me now. Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, that's our little friend. Basically, the point of Otto DAO is to identify and develop and create these cryptographic primitives that help with the capital formation side of public goods funding. Because I think we're doing a lot of efforts, and I love how the capital allocation side of thing has progressed. Really, it's impressive. But now I guess the idea is to focus a little bit on the capital formation side of things. So as you said, things like staking or sequencer fees are super interesting methods. Lotteries is something that can be used and pull funding from retail, but there's also a lot of other things that could potentially be interesting to, let's say, create this more capital formation for public goods funding side. And for example, Harburger tax is one that we might explore in the future, because that potentially has, I guess we we see that nowadays a little bit with advertising. People pay for having space both online and offline. For example, I see a lot of people complaining about having their favorite theater named after a sponsor. I don't know. In Berlin, there was like a big theater that was now called Uber Eats Arena or something like that. And at the beginning, I was like, yeah, that's kind of ugly. But at the same time, it's cool because if we can spin it that okay, this kind of like for-profit parties are funding things that people use commonly is quite interesting. And Harburger tax, I think, could fit into that idea. So I'm super excited to explore those capital formation mechanisms as complementary to the capital allocation ones.
For listeners who are interested in harbinger taxes, you can check out GreenPilled number 25, Collective Decision Making with Matt Pruitt from the Radical Exchange Foundation. Harbinger taxes kind of came out of Radical Exchange, similar to how quadratic funding did. And at a very reductionist TLDR level, it's basically like a way of taxing things in the commons and directing that funding to public goods funding, but in a way that's new and innovative. And I don't want to get into it beyond that, but just wanted the audience to know at a high level what it is. You can check out Greenpill episode 25 with Matt Pruitt if you want to learn more about harbinger taxes.
Awesome. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Can you think of other interesting sources? I was actually running a small workshop at the Regen Village in Brussels during FCC and about capital formation mechanisms, and people came up with cool stuff. Like mostly we mentioned them, but maybe something comes to your head.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so the challenge in this space, before I answer your question, I just want to make a meta commentary, which is like the goal is not to invent new ways to fund public goods that are just like, this is a new construction. The goal is to find things that will actually have enough money going into public goods that it's actually meaningful. And so like I almost think of like if you think of the design space of all ways of funding public goods, you kind of want to do like a breadth first search in which you're looking for new, weird, a priori things, but then you want to do a depth first search or things you already know are working, or you have like a strong a priori conviction that they're going to work. And like Lotto PGF for me, the reason it's interesting is that like lotteries have had multi-million dollars worth of funding in the past, and so it makes sense that in an on-chain world that we would just migrate that on-chain. So anyway, just to like TLDR, it's not about like inventing new ways of doing it for me. It's about the new ways that are actually going to have funding and like realize positive EV for things. But like I don't know, I think that like DAO treasuries and sequencer fees are the areas that we're seeing most of the money flow into on-chain public goods funding right now. I think that if we prove out these things working on chain for crypto, there's going to be a crossing the chasm moment where we can go mainstream and make it feel like more of a Web2 app and start to sell these to cities and NGOs across the world. And I think that right now on chain sources of funding are what we're going to use. But if we ever cross that chasm, it'll be things like lotteries and taxation and like wealthy philanthropists and donors and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's my high level view. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, actually, what you mentioned of crossing the chasm of mainstream adoption, I think maybe that's also what makes me super bullish on Lotto PGF, because it's a mechanism that is, as you say, very known for people. And if we can somehow highlight the fact that they're actually funding public goods and also giving, because maybe another of the problems that we want to solve with Lotto PGF is kind of democratizing the process of creating a lottery so that people can pick the public goods that they want to fund. Because right now, when they play the lottery, they don't even care which public goods is being funded because they don't have any say on which one it is. So like someone who organizes the lottery gets to pick. And if we kind of democratize it and make it available for others to create their own lotteries, then we can start seeing, okay, what are the public goods that people are more incentivized to fund. And what we will see probably is that people won't care too much about like this super minimal chance of winning a big prize, but they will care about the benefit that they get. Like they will become as a sort of collateral benefit, the prize that they could potentially get. Like they would be more interested in funding the public goods that they benefit them directly and have this extra little incentive of winning a prize on the site. So hopefully we can also get this. I see that there's a lot of improvements in the UX of interacting with Web3, like through account abstraction, and been talking to some people who can make, let's say, tickets available for the mainstream with QR codes and stuff like that without them knowing that they're interacting with the blockchain. So if we can get that accessible for people, that will make me very bullish, and also get some mainstream adoption, which is what we need nowadays.
Yeah, I actually I'm kind of happy. I mean, maybe because I'm a builder's builder. David Hoffman always calls me a builder's builder, but like I kind of feel like we got to have crypto. We've got to figure out how to allocate capital to our own DAOs into crypto, and only then can we go mainstream. So I'm not on like the next billion users. Let's create the new next breakout use case, which means that I'm very happy experimenting with people who know how to connect their Web3 wallet and submit transactions. And my hope is that eventually we're doing such good stuff that we've proven out the mechanisms. We just put like a Web2 skin in front of it, and then when the time is right, we can go more mainstream. And I also think like the valence of how crypto is going mainstream is important too. In the last cycle where everyone joined Web3 to buy a bag, a meme coin or an NFT, and then the cycle ends and they're just a bag holder. That's a different experience than earning for doing good in your community. And your first experience with crypto being positive EV, like earning tokens for volunteering in your community. And I think it just leaves people with a different valence and puts the best foot forward if we were able to go mainstream that way. So that's at least the vision that I'm pursuing.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Like we should, because one of the inspirations for Lotto PGF was I've been involved with many communities. I'm one of the founders of Ethereum Bolivia, for example, and here in Europe we created also another community for Web3 builders. And having a community like doesn't really have a business model. Like it's very hard to create a business model around it, and funding again relies a lot on sponsors and stuff like that. So I believe like Lotto PGF can also start giving these Web3 communities that don't really that do everything, all this education and all this onboarding. They do it kind of like on a voluntary basis. Give them a little bit of funding to spread the word a little bit more, and yeah, so that's exciting. I wanted to say something else, but I I forgot.
I know that we've been talking at the meta level for a couple of minutes here. We'd love to sort of end on a more tangible level. So with Lotto PGF, you can you can finance public goods for your DAO in 3 stages. You create a lottery, incentivize donations, and then pick winners, and the system picks the winners and distributes the funds. If listeners are interested in running this mechanism in their DAO or in their community, where can they do that? Is it lottopgf.org?
Yeah, so right now we're kind of running the first pilots. So there will be a waitlist that you can join on lottopgf.org. We're screening kind of like the best candidates. To do that, we will also share our experiences with this on-chain Lotteria, with Zuzalu and these other lotteries that we're doing, and fit it to there. So yeah, definitely if you're interested in exploring this to fund your community DAO or any cause that you want, please just join the waitlist, and feel free to reach out to me personally as well to jam some ideas. Actually, been talking to a lot of people about how lotteries can be upgraded thanks to crypto, thanks to them being on chain. So if you have some ideas, also just reach out to I'm Nick Node everywhere, NICNODE. So my DMs are open.
Great. And there's some links in the show notes for people who want to check it out. Nico, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to tell the audience before we break?
Actually, I would love to talk a little bit about the Degen's handshake regions idea that, was really inspired by the movement that you built amongst other people of, this Degen to region pipeline, but kind of I wanted to take it a little bit of a step forward in the sense that, okay, we should actually collaborate with Degens as regions and vice versa
Yeah.
to move this space forward. And I think that idea is flourishing a lot, and I'm super excited to see more projects that leverage some Degen dynamics. For example, like the region token. At the hackathon in Brussels, I heard some people who wanted to do something in the lines of Lotto PGF, like a public goods casino where like the house would fund public goods and create these small games where people gamble, and dynamics like that. So I'm excited to see some of these projects embracing a little bit of the Degen energy, or some Degen projects also embracing a little bit of the region energy and do something for good.
Yeah, I mean, I think one problem with crypto Twitter is it's created maximalists around ideas and tokens, which, they're powerful marketing vehicles for these things, but it also makes people sort of reject other ways of thinking. And I think that for me, the Degen and Regen meme are, the map is not the territory. It's a limited way of understanding the world. It's very reductionist. But I also think that, to me, Degen and Regen are kind of like yin and yang. Like you can't have one without the other. And so I think what Lotto PGF is doing, where you kind of leverage people's DeFi degen sort of side in order for regen ends, is interesting. Degen means for regen ends is sort of an interesting construction, and I'll be curious to see if it scales or grows. The other meme that's sort of in my brain as I talk about this is on April Fool's, Vitalik wrote this post about degen communism, which was sort of his way of saying taking the degen stuff and then hooking it into public goods funding. But he said it in the most provocative way possible because it was April Fool's Day. But it sort of reminds me of that a little bit. But yeah, I hope to see more constructions like this appear and more of them scale. I think the design space is quite vast since we have hundreds of regen primitives and money Legos and hundreds of degen money Legos and primitives. Someone has to be able to grasp both cultures and combine them together, and that's how we innovate.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I've seen a couple projects that I mostly on hackathons that I hope they move forward. There was one called Gnomish that we're doing something with meme coins in which like I don't know, you could use meme coins that rugged or some low liquidity tokens to somehow fund public goods by playing also some sort of lottery or gambling kind of thing. So yeah, I'm excited to see more of those as well. Feel free to reach out to me if you are building one or know of someone who's building one, because we have a small community of people who are kind of like thinking in this space of how to create this yin yang that you mentioned. So
Yeah.
that's also something interesting that people can do as a follow up.
Well, this has been a fun episode for the audience. Go to LottoPGF.org and you can follow Nick and LottoPGF on X/Twitter. And thanks again for joining Greenpill, Nico. This was fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks, Kevin.
All right, we just heard from Nico of Lotto PGF. I'm excited about this mechanism because I think lotteries have for centuries helped us fund public goods. And so if we can bring them on chain, make them better, in what ways are we going to be able to fund public goods better in the 21st century in an on-chain world? Thanks for listening to the GreenPilled Network podcast. Again, we are featuring the people who are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers focused on using crypto to bring positive sum digital systems to the world, like Nico, like Lotto PGF. If you value our work, you can collect this episode. Go to pods.media to browse all episodes and start collecting. Thank you to CyrusTheVirus.eth, MontyMerlin.eth, SSJ.eth for collecting recent episodes of the Greenpill podcast. Your support helps make this podcast. Your support helps support the Greenpill movement. And while you're here, please make an offering to our algorithmic overlords. Please subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps people find the regenerative crypto economics movement. Well, until next time, see you later. Peace.